Section off. I will be sharing my screen and we will get started. Andres, do you want to get us going?
Hello, everybody. It's a great pleasure to be here. Just welcome. We're going to talk about semantic gravity in a 3-minute thesis, a project that we've been engaged in for some time now. And specifically, we're going to focus on the data from 3-minute thesis, 3-minute thesis. So first of all, let me tell you that for those of you who are not as familiar with the 3-minute thesis, 3-minute thesis is a competition, a speech competition that usually graduate students engaged in, and it consists of presenting their research to a lay audience in 3 minutes. These are a new genre emerging research, and the emerging research here, it's, as you could see, it's not too prominent, and it's because it's just a very new genre. It's a worldwide spread for sure, and also we have its characteristics is that it has a very strong contextual constraint, specifically to the here and now. And as I said, is presenting a research to an educated and yet non-specialized audience. So we began with our main, one of the our questions is, how can we help students compose effective 3-minute thesis? And when we go to the website for these universities that hold these competitions worldwide, pretty much the advice from the official website, it's very similar, and we would argue it's very limited. In general, it's about writing for an audience that is not specialized, to avoid jargon and academic language. As you could see there, explain concepts to people, and people important to your research, because that might not be familiar for other audiences. And basically imagine that you're explaining research to someone else, to a different audience. Above all, they ask to tell a story. But how accurate is this advice? We are actually questioning that, and based on this advice, we might predict that a low flat line for semantic gravity will be produced. But we are asking ourselves, is this what a successful 3-minute thesis actually look like? And clearly, we began basically asking this empirical question, and we began with the process of using legitimation code theories to find out specifically semantic density and semantic gravity, but we ended up with semantic gravity. This is actually, based on our data, this is what they might actually look like. So it's quite different from a low concrete flat line.
So we'll now talk a little bit about how we analyzed our data and some of the challenges that we faced in LCT analysis. The sample that we took was a convenience sample of 98 3MTs from around the world. We chose finalists because we thought that would indicate higher quality and would be better, more useful pedagogically. They were transcribed and segmented at the sentence level. That was our unit of measurement. We found that coding at the word or word group level to be a little too delicate for the kind of pedagogical information that we were hoping to use, that we were hoping to produce and later teach. So that's why we chose the sentence level as our unit of measurement. You can see right here that the sample is mostly FAU, which is Florida Atlantic University, which is where Andres is at, but we have a good sample from University of Queensland, which is where 3MT started. and then a few others from Asia Pacific and the United States. When we started analyzing this data with semantic gravity, we ran into problems with reliability and accuracy. And so that's what we're going to focus on today in our talk. The first thing that we're going to focus on is reliability. So most of the semantic wave articles in the LCT database are qualitative, and they crucially do not report a translation device. This is as of January 2021. You can see there about 2/3 of them. Reporting translation devices helps build reliability and improves trust with the reader and with other scholars. As Maton and Chen write in their kind of foundational book chapter discussing the methodology for developing these translation devices, without making explicit one's theory and the principles of its enactment, and in ways that enable others to recreate the analysis for themselves, the veracity of one's knowledge claims remains obscured. So we are interested in producing a translation device that will be reliable, that will, if we gave them to somebody, if we gave the translation device to another scholar, they would come to the same conclusions as we would. And so one of the big questions that we asked ourselves was, how can we improve the reliability of translation devices? In another vein of research, we also became interested in improving accuracy. So the problem that we ran into with accuracy is many semantic wave profiles are primarily heuristic. You can see this from some of the early semantic wave literature published. I think some of this was in that, these are from the Linguistics and Education volume that, or issue that we may all be familiar with. So these heuristics necessarily sacrifice accuracy of measuring the underlying construct that is semantic gravity for its pedagogical value. We can see evidence of sacrificing accuracy because in this article, there was no translation device reported, no units of measure on the x-axis. We don't know what time units are being used here. There are no units of measure on the y-axis. We don't know what the interval strength or the ordinal strength of the semantic gravity and the semantic density are in this particular heuristic. And in =6, the sample size was really small. But, fundamentally, it doesn't matter because this is just meant to be a heuristic. It's just meant to be for teaching purposes. So we acknowledge heuristics are useful for teaching, and teachers face constraints of time and resources that limit their ability to do in-depth text analysis whenever they want to, teach their students something from LCT. And students don't always need highly precise, highly accurate models. But heuristics should be built on accurate models of the underlying phenomena. The map needs to, kind of accurately represent the territory, even if the map is simplified in some way. And so current research has built useful wave heuristics, and we think that we should work to improve the accuracy of the wave models so that we can have more confidence that the resulting heuristics are based on an accurate analysis of the underlying phenomena that is semantic waves. So we came to this question, how can we improve the accuracy of LCT profiles? But first, let's talk about that first question of reliability. Okay, and Andres is going to try to give a transparent representation of our methodology here.
So in building a reliable translation device, we took an alternative methodology for translation device building, as you could see there. In 2017, we began with the collection of data, of public data, the 98 3MTs that Michael talked about. Then we created a preliminary model poster presentation that a student called Chelsea Zubieta, who's been working with us. She's actually was finishing high school at the time, and now she's in the also in college at FAU. So she presented this preliminary model poster presentation in 2018, which then led in 2019 to the translation device development. So we incorporated the corpus tool, which some of you are familiar with, to actually be able to conduct this analysis. And then we began testing the translation device in 2020, including the inter-rated reliability that Michael was talking about. In 2021, we did a translation device revision, and we are hoping that in 2022 we will have continue the translation device revision, hopefully with feedback from peers, full coding of corpus, an average wave semantic gravity calculation, purpose move analysis, which we don't have time to get into, but we found that to be really important, and of course publishing some of these initial results somewhere. In terms of the translation device development method, we got inspired by Maune and Chen, where they actually just did an empirical thematic analysis initially, then continued with organizational coding, and finalized with theory on to analytical coding. For our purposes, we call this a feature-oriented multi-contextual semantic gravity translation device. It's a process of development of a multi-contextual semantic gravity translation device. We started with theory because we realized that we needed to specify the contexts for the 3-minute thesis. And so in doing so, we drew on SFL context of situation heavily. That's why the theory is there in that sense. Then we developed a prototype, a translation device with pylon testing and reliability testing on then 25 tests. And then we produced a second iteration of the translation device. In all the literature about translation devices, we gather one of the main enduring understandings is that the process should be iterative. So that's what we continue doing. So in terms of specifying contexts, our external language of description was SFL, model of context, being the LCT, and more specifically, semantic gravity, our internal language of description. And in terms of the SFL model of context, we had the field. The field was represented by the topic of the research of the 3-minute thesis and the research discipline. The tenor was represented by a lay audience and an expert researcher. And the mode, of course, is an oral presentation in the form of a 3-minute thesis or 3-minute speech. In this case, once again, we following Maune and Doran's conceptualization of semantic gravity, we specified contexts. We actually organized the elements of context based on how close they were from the here and now. So the lay audience was closer to the here and now. Then we continue with the topic of research and expert researcher, and finally the research discipline. In terms of the specificity of specifying these contexts, then we became on the lowest level of delicacy on the left. So we just divided into audience independent and audience dependent. So that was the most connected to the here and now. Then in terms of the expert researcher, we, as you could see, it says audience independent, speaker independent, or audience independent, speaker dependent. So we had different levels of delicacy, as you could see, going to the right, with the research discipline in which we then were able to map that much more in detail, and in the level of the delicacy. In terms of the prototype translation device, we read 5 texts. Then we built a prototype with empirical indicators based on that. And then we were able to test on the sample of 25 of these tests once we came up with the empirical indicators for the translation device. And Mike is going to talk a little bit about that.
So yeah, this is our initial translation device. You got to see it for a second there. The testing of this initial translation device is really where we got immersed in the data. So we started with 3 raters who coded 25 random texts, inclusive of the pilot data. We ended up in our calculations only using 2 of the raters, me and Chelsea, and we calculated the inter-rater reliability between those 2 raters using a weighted Cohen's kappa. Cohen's kappa helps us factor in chance agreement. So we, just the bare bones, we had something like 80-90% agreement, but that doesn't factor in the possibility of us agreeing just by chance. So Cohen's kappa factors that in. If you're not familiar with Cohen's kappa, 0.8 is kind of the target. It ranges from 0 to 1, and if you can get 80% agreement, that's kind of the standard. We calculated our agreement at 2 levels of delicacy, the highest and the lowest. So at the lowest level of delicacy, the most abstract, at the audience level, our kappa was 0.73, which is pretty good. We just needed a few minor refinements. For the most detailed level of delicacy, the discipline, our kappa was 0.64, which is not ideal and indicated that we needed to do reevaluation of the underlying construct of what do we mean by being strongly tied to the discipline. And so Andres is going to talk a little bit about what happened after we did that initial testing and the second iteration translation device that came out of it.
So we came up with the second iteration of this translation device. As you could see, this is data driven and a really grounded process on the data. And we had the fortune to have many of you that are attending this presentation to give us feedback on this second version of the translation device. So our colleagues thank you to the LCT North America Roundtable for providing valuable feedback. We then went into refining this, and instead of saying audience dependent or independent, we began using, and in a way we kind of came up with the idea of decontextualize and recontextualize, also thinking about Basil Bernstein's and recontextualization and all that. So we at the very level of delicacy of decontextualize, you would have a text inputted into the corpus tool, which you can see on the right. And as you can see, it's all coded, and is coded at the different levels. So the first level would be here to choose if the sentence is contextualized or recontextualized. In this case, is recontextualized. And the next step would be to go to the next level of delicacy, and we coded it as interactional. And finally, the last piece of delicacy, then we go and code it as personified. Remember that this is where we applied inter-rater reliability, and then when we were not in agreement, then we actually talk to every single disagreement. So before, yeah, we're
Yeah, I
going
was just.
to, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead, Andres. Sorry.
So because it was so useful to have feedback, we're actually going to give you a couple of minutes to read these definitions, because then we're going to do an exercise in which you get to apply our translation device. And so we'll leave you there, Michael, if you want to say anything else.
Yeah, I was just going to say, actually, we have these definitions and examples in the link that I'm going to send to you. So we would like to test our third iteration translation device and see what would happen if we gave a translation device to a bunch of LCT scholars, and what kind of reliability would we have. So we're just going to ask you to do a very simple binary, decontextualize or recontextualize. The definitions will be in the link that I'm going to send you, which is it's a Google form. Let me just really briefly copy that. Actually, it's on this slide. My bad. So you can go to bit.ly/3mt-sg, or I'm going to put the link in the chat here, so you can probably just go there. This test will give you 7 sentences from one of our 3-minute theses, and it'll ask you to pick decontextualize versus recontextualize, and it'll have the full definitions and examples to guide you there. But we want to see how reliable our indicators are here. And we are going to put you in breakout rooms so that you can kind of discuss, but we do ask you to each individually give your judgment. And at the end, we will calculate reliability by using Krippendorf's alpha, which sounds like something from Harry Potter, which is so on theme. And that will be based off of the results that you guys give us. This will not be published. This is just kind of informal feedback to let us know how close we are in terms of producing a reliable instrument.
Okay, before we go into that, Michael is going to show us a little bit of examples in the previous slide, so that you could we could actually go and you could have some idea of what we're looking for here. So as you could see, they're contextualized and versus recontextualized, and maybe leaving there will help you, and then you could go into the Google form.
Yeah, we'll leave this on the screen just for right now. But again, if you go into the link, all of this information is there as well. Before we open up the rooms, and there are a few people that will be in this room. That'll be Vicky, Wintao, and me and Andres. Does anyone have any questions before we get into it?
I just asked whether the examples in the survey were in chronological order, like these are all from the same.
No, they were randomly selected, kind of. Yep. Okay, cool. We'll open up the rooms and you guys can go at it. We'll do this for 10 minutes. Or 8 minutes. Okay. So, oh, Jason, you're also in here. Okay.
I also don't see any invitation to join any room.
No, yeah, Vicky and Wintao, you guys we wanted to keep one of the rooms here in the main room.
I see. Yep. That's fine.
Yep. So we'd love to hear what you guys think about the sentences in the link. Or if you need time to read through the definitions, that would be totally reasonable.
Yeah, I'd like to read the definitions.
Yeah, sure. And I'll go ahead and share the share what this looks like for those who are watching online. So whenever you guys are ready, we can talk about any of these sentences. We got about 5 minutes left. Vicky and Wintao and anyone else who is in this main room, do you guys want to talk about the first sentence? We all know we don't like to admit it, but it's no secret that everyone poops. Any thoughts on how you would code that one?
Okay.
We do have a few people also in this room that didn't join. Eunice, AJ, Wintao, Vicky, Dimple. So if you'd like to share what you think on this, feel free.
Thank you.
Vicky, what are you thinking? You've been with us for a long time on going through this project, so I'm really curious about your thoughts. Vicky, can you hear me? Maybe she froze.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. Yep, she just got kicked out. Okay. Well, anyone else here? AJ, Wintao? Melissa, I know you're busy, but if you want to do this, you're welcome to. Okay, well, since we are now just since people are watching online, we might talk through our own process here, Andres. So what do you think about this first one? How would you code it?
What are you talking to?
Andres, you.
Oh,
Since no one else is participating, I thought, well, they would like to. We will make sure that folks who are watching on YouTube are getting something out of this experience.
sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so it says we all know, we don't like to admit it, but it's not secret that everyone poops. So that would be recontextualized.
Yeah. Why are you coding that? I agree.
Yeah. We are included there. We so there are pronouns there that are inclusive of that personalized, recontextualized for the audience. So the
Yep.
audience is being included, and the at the level of field, you know, you're talking about poops, which makes it very everyday, you know. So it's kind of like getting at the level of the. It's almost like humor, so it's recontextualization as well.
Yeah. So then this next one, what we should discuss more openly, however, is where it can sometimes end up after we flush it. So I think for the same reason that you said before, we've got the pronoun we, so they're including the audience, so it's strongly tied to the audience
Exactly.
element of the context. What about this next one? Fecal waste can pollute environmental waters through sources including leaky septic tanks, agricultural runoff, and wild animals.
So this would be, for the audience, this would be decontextualized.
Yeah, I also marked it as decontextualized.
Right?
Yeah.
Why would you say, Vicky?
Because it's, I was reading at the definitions, and that's
Yes.
because of it's a generalization, and there is no the you and me included.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yep. Yep. And then we got direct exposure. We're coming back in about a minute here, so just a heads up to everyone. Direct exposure to sewage from recreational activities like swimming can make you and your family sick by increasing the risk of contact with pathogens such as viruses and antibiotic-resistant bacteria. This one's maybe a little trickier.
This sounds tricky because to me it has like the first direct exposure to sewage can make from recreational activities like swimming. It sounds like you know, decontextualized, but it says you and your family, and it's relating to the context.
Yeah.
I will say recontextualized.
Absolutely, and this is part of this is the trade-off that we made when we made the sentence the unit of measurement, because you're absolutely right. This first part is more decontextualized, but the you and your family, that definitely makes it more recontextualized. I'm going to close the we're not gonna have time to get through all of these, but Vicky, if you want to submit yours, you're welcome to do that. I'm gonna close the rooms. And we'll see what people think. And Andres, you're going to take care of this? The discussion while I do the Krippendorf's alpha?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, great. We're just waiting. We've got about 6 submissions right now, so.
Okay,
and
so maybe we could actually go back to the sentences and then discuss there.
Oh yeah, sure. That's a great idea.
So, okay, so can we have a thumbs up on the first one if you feel that it's recontextualized, Like, can you just put your...
Andres, I was wondering if we could maybe just ask for, like, in general, how this went, because we already have that data.
you have the data. Okay.
Yeah, we already have it. So
Everybody, just asking if you were able to. How did you feel? How confident did you feel about assigning recontextualize or decontextualize to the sentences? Helen is going.
Helen and I were together in a group, and I think what we discovered was that we had to recontextualize the definitions of decontextualized and recontextualized. And once we'd done that, it all was very straightforward. We had to come to some understanding of what you were actually saying for a while.
Right. Michael and I were absolutely thinking about this and said, we need to be absolutely clear of what it means for us. How are we defining decontextualize and recontextualize? One of the things that Michael, if you go a little bit down, just to show, higher, down to one of the sentences I am looking for. Okay, there. Yeah. So. Okay, so look at this, the one that says direct exposure to sewage from recreational activities like swimming, right? That one, from a traditional perspective, we would call this, like, there's a lot of technical vocabulary there. In fact, from a grammatical aspect, you have a really, really complex noun group at the very beginning, right? Before the verb can, and that might, in a traditional sense, it might trigger an idea that this is academic, so therefore is decontextualized. But remember that the 3-minute thesis, the idea is that here and now pulls the gravitational pull of the semantic gravity really low. Then that's when in the second part you have they can make you and your family sick. You see that? So it's always trying to connect to the audience, and the audience pulls down that. And remember that these are highly praised finalists. So anyway, just to give you food for thought on that. I wanna hear a little bit about other groups and how did it go in the process in general? Like, what did you find useful or difficult at the very beginning, just like what Helen and Jennifer was telling us? Anyone else wants to share anything that you found?
Jen, I would be curious to understand what your process of recontextualizing what we had in the translation device, what that meant for you. What did that look like?
Oh, we went back and we looked at your definitions, obviously, but then we came up with a pat one, I think, was, is this talking directly to the audience or is this to a very broad general audience? So if it was a broad general audience, therefore more formal, therefore more abstract, no direct engagement, then it was decontextualized. And if there was, I think now looking at it, it's a matter of engagement. Where there's a lot of engagement, you've got a recontextualized situation.
Yeah,
so we just had to
more interpersonal.
Therefore, sorry, Helen.
Sorry, I was just going to say more interpersonal.
Yeah, more interpersonal. Therefore, that was our sort of trigger. This is very interpersonal. This is direct. Therefore, recontextualize for the audience.
That's really useful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Andres, did you get that?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, good. Any other feedback on the translation device? Please feel free to be honest. I do have a calculation now. Our Krippendorf's alpha is 0.61, which that's not great. And it looks like it was a lot of the later ones. The first few had almost universal agreement, and the latter ones had a lot of difficulty. Specifically, number 6, it looks like, number 5, and number 4. So this one, and this one. Could anyone offer some feedback on what you talked about with any of these sentences?
I'll just say one thing I struggled with. There was the one on my thesis. Yeah, my master's thesis. So
Yeah.
I think I kind of dropped that in decontextualize, but the personalized could be, hang on, me as part of this context or me as in not part of this context. So I think that could be a point of difference there.
Gotcha. Okay. Meaning that, okay, so you were saying that decontextualize and recontextualize as a measure of the here and now, it's somewhat unclear because the person is in the here and now who is speaking and they're referring to themselves. So yeah, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, but they're referring to relatively abstract things that aren't here and now, that previous stuff, abstract stuff. And so I can't think, I did just we didn't discuss, we caught up, but yeah. But I put it as decontextualized, but now when you're like, well, where's the point of difference? I'm like, well, if we talked about it, that would have been what I would have discussed.
Yeah, that's fine. Fiona, you also had your hand up? Or F. Jackson, I'm sorry.
Yeah, Fiona, that's right. Yes, I was with Carol. And yes, I mean, that one with the you and your family, we talked about that one quite a lot, and obviously looked at what you've highlighted as well, that you've got a very personalized kind of you and your family surrounded by a lot of seemingly more abstract, complex, more technical noun phrases. So I had a strong sense of, well, decontextualize, recontextualize is a bit of a reductionist binary. You almost need a gradation.
Right, yeah, and that's what we were hoping would happen at the lower levels of delicacy. And the other thing is that, as you're noting, and we talked about this in the main discussion room, the sentence as a unit of measure is always a compromise, because you have other groups of words that are pulling the gravity in different directions. One thing that I think that we need to make clear in our instructions in the future is that whatever is the strongest gravity, that's it. So whatever features you see that are pulling it down the most, that's where we're saying that the sentence is going. Okay, cool. So I'm going to move on to our second question, which is how can we improve accuracy of LCT profiles? Thank you all for all that feedback. It was very useful. Okay, so the last thing that we're going to talk about is the method that we developed for producing accurate waves, solving the average wave problem. So this is what we have calculated from 21 3-minute theses. This is what the wave looks like if you average all the points out, with standard deviation bars, which you should note increases our confidence in this way or decreases our confidence in this wave quite a bit because there is a lot of variance. Every standard deviation is approximately 2. So there is a wide gap in what you can actually do for each text. This was based off of consensus coding between 2 coders on 21 3MT. So we all agreed, the 2 coders being me and Andres or me and Chelsea agreed on one of the codes. So how did we do this? How do we average waves between 2 texts of different lengths? If we take the unit of text time being sentences, well, you could average sentence 1 from one text and sentence 2 of another text. But what if the texts are of different lengths? What do you do with the remainder? That's the real problem. So what you got to do is normalize the data. And we do this by dividing each wave into the same number of increments. So we'll simplify everything and remove unnecessary information. We're just interested in the points. That is the strength of the semantic gravity at a particular time in the text. So if we divide up everything into an equal number, we'll pick tenths just for simplicity. The tenths of the talk are now our x values, and they roughly correspond to 10% into the text, 20% into the text, 30%, and so on. Then we average up all the semantic gravity strengths, sorry, it should say semantic gravity, all the semantic gravity strengths, the y values, for each tenth of the text, that is the x values. And so just a quick demonstration of what this looks like. So for this first tenth, we have semantic gravity at 3 for the first text, and then semantic gravity at 4 and at 0 for the second text. I do want to say one thing. I want to thank Carol Chappelle for her advice on correcting some of the methods that we did here, because this reflects her advice, what we're about to do right here. So we take the average of all of those semantic gravity points at this particular text time, 0.1 into the text, or 10% into the text, and we get 2.33, and that tells us what the first point in the average semantic gravity wave would be. Okay, and then we would just continue to do that throughout the entire text, and when we do that, we get this. Okay. And so obviously a few I'll talk about limitations in a minute. The average wave, as you can see here, is with a great deal of variance. And that also reflects that it is strongly affected by outlier texts. I remember one text that is just like, it's a low flat line for maybe like 2/3 of it at the very beginning. And so that is affecting the contour of this average wave. Perhaps a more robust measure would be the median wave. That's what this looks like, again, from the 21 texts. It resists the pull of the outlier texts, and we'll offer some interpretation of this wave in a minute. I do want to talk just briefly about limitations. Obviously, sample size is small, 21 text and 543 sentences. This also does not reflect small changes to the translation device that we recently made, and we need to go back and recode everything. And it would likely make the wave a little higher. That's what we think. And obviously standard deviation is 2, so there is lots of variance. But a quick interpretation here, and these points could be useful for pedagogical could be useful
purposes.
For teaching, purposes, pedagogical purposes. This is not a low flat line. It's not what we predicted, right? It's kind of medium recontextualization. Crucially, it's not super high either, right? It's kind of low in general. It's closer to 0 than it is to the top, which is 7. And so that's useful for the students to know. While the advice on the site is a little reductive, it's not completely wrong. You don't want to go really abstract with this thing, or at least not for too long. The early up waves suggest a gradual building of context for the lay audience. That mid down wave likely indicates a statement of purpose and the scaffolding of methods. That's based off of other genre analysis that we've done. It correlates with that. Then we have this late up wave that suggests that the audience is now up to speed. They can handle less contextualization. And then finally, at the end, we have a late down wave that likely shows recontextualization for the lay audience. So they bring it home sometimes back to the metaphor that they started with at the beginning, or some kind of joke, just bringing it back to the audience, and some kind of closing greeting, which we coded as low.
So Michael, so we previously stated that teachers necessarily draw on available evidence to answer immediate questions. Through our project, we hope that this analysis provides at least a path towards evidence that can be used by teachers in a more reliable and accurate way. Thank you very much for you listening and for your feedback.
And we have about 9 minutes for questions. We also want to mention, we'll have our, here's our references. And if anyone wants to learn a little bit more about how to do the average wave, please get in contact with us. And we're considering possibly doing a workshop in the future. So if we have enough interest, we may do that. And you can look for our publications hopefully soon. We're working on that.
So can I ask a question about the this averaging of the wave? I was tempted to do something similar in my work, but I'm wondering with this exactly why you want the averaging and what you're averaging. If this is also not only the scripts, but scripts at all levels, what do you achieve? If you took all the high-level scripts and analyzed them, the ones that get the best marks, and then the low level, and looked at what they looked like, I could see that for me, that would be a purpose that I could imagine. But at the moment, to me, it's doing this just general averaging seems to be like dropping an ice block into a cup of boiling water and then ending up with room temperature water you could have just turned on the tap.
So
why are you doing it? What's your rationale behind this overall averaging?
So the initial sample was just finalists. So you said high and low.
They're all good.
They're all good.
Good.
They are excellent. They are all winners.
Yeah, well, they're finalists. They're not all like first place, but they were finalists. So this average is what we think is close to the central tendency of really good 3-minute theses.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
But good, absolutely good point. And the other thing was, we didn't know what the result was going to be. We thought it might be what you just talked about. We thought it might just be a flat line. And then we'd be like, what? Okay, what do we do with that? But thankfully, it did show some kind of contour that could be useful for students.
Along the lines of what SFL LCT is trying to do, it's also trying to look at to provide visible guidelines for students or teachers specifically, and the average wave of successful finalist 3-minute thesis might be an indication of what they want to do, what they want to emulate, almost like what we do in genre-based pedagogy with model texts. So that's what we're thinking about pedagogically.
Sharon wanted to ask a question.
Hi, thank you. Look, this is just a super quick question, picking up on when you talked. You showed one slide with the median, and then you've sort of come back to the average. And to me, that median slide was the really useful one when I was looking at it, because I had all those same questions about, the average sort of flattening everything out. So is there a reason ultimately you've come back to talking about the average, or do you think actually you're more likely to go with these median waves?
I think the median is the better model. Yeah, I agree. We went for average because we also want to see variance. And the mean shows us variance where the median doesn't, or at least not as easily. So like that variance is troubling, right? It's
Yeah.
it's almost like a flat line, you know. You could do whatever, but I think the median wave would be more useful for students because it is, the peaks are more peakier, they're higher, and the troughs are lower, and this would, I think, be a little bit more useful for instruction.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, I'm actually doing a session this afternoon at my workplace with the ECR group I run there, where we actually do run through 3-minute theses model. So I'm actually going to ask you, please, can I have these slides? Because I would love to show
Absolutely.
them
Sure.
these models. But when it comes to talking to people about, well, in public presentation, this is what actually makes sense. The median, of course, gives it a more instant thing to talk to.
Yep, absolutely. Any question? Any other? Fiona? Fiona has raised her hand. Feel free to speak. You are on mute.
Hi.
There you go.
Hi. Just thinking of pedagogic applications and other things that I've seen with the results of genre work in written genres. Wouldn't one of the key things be to do the similar kind of analysis for average scoring and the lowest scoring theses to land up in the end? Because I mean, a sort of an average is useful pedagogically to say, okay, this is what the broad kind of pattern is. But at one level, in something that's like as competitive as a 3-minute thesis, simply, students perhaps don't want to aim to have a fairly mechanistic reproduction of an average, because then you'll get more and more presentations that in their structure are just very, very similar. But what one perhaps needs is the nuance of what do high scoring presentations always have? What do they never have? What do the lowest scoring ones always have that the high scoring ones never have? That type of nuance in the end. So that students have a stronger sense of saying, okay, these are the kind of compulsory core elements of a successful presentation. And these are the areas where you've got to have a play of variance. Certain kinds of variance are what makes a top presentation, and certain kinds of variance are what make a bottom presentation.
Absolutely. Thank you, Fiona. We of course chose a sample that was a convenient sample that was available online, and the ones that were available were the finalists for obvious reasons. But absolutely, we're thinking that once we have a really, really reliable and accurate translation device, then we could actually go into that kind of work and comparing others. I haven't thought in this way yet, but I'm sure we're basically methodologically developing a translation device that is going to be very useful, not only for 3-minute thesis, but for perhaps for oral presentations as well. As Anna was talking about, I don't know if you saw that, Michael, but she was talking about some teachers that had to present, that would be really important for that. So absolutely, we're thinking about those models and those applications and more that you could let us know. Initially, we started with the fact that, as Michael pointed out, that we were running into these challenges, that heuristics were very useful, but that we shouldn't sacrifice the heuristic value for accuracy or for reliability. So that's what we try to incorporate into this model.
Yep. And I think we got to wrap up. I'll just say one other thing. Look for an article about the purpose move that will talk about different types of good and different distributions of different locations for the purpose move. We are thinking about that just in a different project.
Thank you.
Thanks,
very
everyone.
much.